Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to thank Hilary and Jeff Dritz for sponsoring the short video on the Dvar Torah for Parshat Beshallach. And it's to commemorate the Yortzeit of Hilary's mother, Hilary's father, Alexander ben Tzvi Zichrono Livracha. May his neshama have an aliyah in Gan Eden, amongst other things, in the schut of the Dvar Torah sponsored by Hilary and Jeff. There's a very, very famous statement of our sages concerning the miracle that happened in the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea. They said the following. They said that at that event, the average maidservant amongst the Jewish people was privy to a prophecy greater than they saw at that event, something greater than even a prophet like Yechezkeil, Hanavi, that he saw. And first of all, concerning what verse are Chazal saying this? They're referring to the verse in the Shirah, which says that Yechezkeil vanveyu Elohei avi v'aromemenu. Everyone, all the Jewish people said, Yechezkeil, this is my God, and I will beautify him, referring to, amongst other things, beautifying the mitzvot. And because they use that expression, Zeh means this. It means that things were so clear to them about Hashem that they were able to say Zeh means this. And we know that whenever the Torah uses, or the Nevi'im, or we ever use the word Zeh, it always means that it's so clear that we're able to actually point with our fingers. That's why on the night of the Seder, for example, when we say matzah zu, we use the word zeh or zu, and then when we point with our fingers to it has to be in front of us. So to get back to the point, when they said that this is our God and we will beautify him or glorify him, so it means that their God was mamash in front of them, that they could point to them. So that level of prophecy was so great that even a prophet like Yechezkeil wasn't privy, he wasn't zocher, he didn't merit that type of clarity when he saw Hashem. And the obvious question, there's two questions over here, which needs to be clarified. How is it that an ordinary maidservant got to a level which are higher than Yechezkeil? And why does the Gemara, when making the statement or the Mechilta in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, why does it make it in reference to particularly the prophet Yechezkeil and not, let's say, the prophet of Yeshayahu? Why doesn't it say the woman, the maidservant, the ordinary woman, maidservant? She wasn't a person who had developed herself in any way. She wasn't on a high spiritual level. Why doesn't it say that she saw at Yam Suf more than, let's say, Isaiah saw? So there's a very I don't remember who said, but I think it was one of the Rosh Hashivas of Merkaz. I'm not sure. But the point is like this. What did she see, the maidservant, that Yechezkeil didn't see? Let's start off. What did Yechezkeil see that was not clear to him? We all know that the famous the prophecy, the vision of the dry bones. The Jewish people now witness the destruction of the temple, or they're about to, and the Jewish people, Yechezkeil amongst them, are in the Galut, they're in the exile of Babylon, and Hashem shows them this vision of the dry bones in the valley. And Hashem says to Yechezkeil, so what do you see? He says the dry bones. And Hashem says to Yechezkeil, tell me, do you think these dry bones will ever live? So Yechezkeil says, I don't know. I don't know. Only you know if they can. In other words, what Yechezkeil saw was the vision of the dry bones with the Jewish people, totally destroyed, totally like dry bones. And he can't see, it's not clear to him, is there any hope? Is there any chance of the Jewish people after such a destruction? Will they be able to ever live again? Will they be able to reform? And then miraculously, we know that. But akopanim, that Yechezkeil, when he witnessed the devastation of the destruction of the Jewish people, in other words, the destruction of, he knew the destruction of the temple, the first temple, and the loss of prophecy, basically, and that the Jewish people going into exile, that was a situation of dry bones in which he thought he didn't know how to answer. How would the Jewish people ever come out of this? Now, the maidservants, this is the Chidush. When they came out of Egypt, they actually also witnessed the destruction of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were in Egypt for basically 210 years. The Jewish people were so assimilated. They were so downtrodden. They were so part of the Egyptian culture. We know that 4/5 of the Jewish people, 80% of the Jewish people died in the plague of darkness. They didn't want to come out. They didn't want to, with all the miracles, they didn't want to come out. They were totally destroyed culturally, spiritually, and therefore also afterwards, like physically, they actually died in Mitzrayim. And so what happened in Mitzrayim, that people after 210 years, they were basically destroyed. And to emerge from Egypt, and only 49 days later to emerge from that case, to be in a situation where they accepted the Torah, Matan Torah, I mean, that's a Tchiyat HaMeitim. And that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, a Shivcha, who went through Yetziat Mitzrayim and came to the stage, first of all, of Kriyat Yamsuf, she saw a parallel situation in Jewish history, which Yechezkeil saw. In other words, of people who were dry bones. And she saw, though, what he didn't see. He didn't see that there was a possibility of resurrection, and she saw the resurrection. She, in Kriyat Yamsuf, saw how Jewish people emerged from Egypt, how they were resurrected. It was only 20%, but they were resurrected. And they not only were they resurrected, they were resurrected in the most complete form that 7 weeks later they accepted the Torah. And that's the story of the Jewish people. Many times, I mean, even in the last war of the October 7th, there were the phenomena in which the Jewish people, how are we ever going to get out of this? How are we going to get out of people who say the things that they do? I don't want to go into all the politics, but the people are totally dead. How do the Jewish people in these dead moments, in these dry-boned moments, how do they think to themselves, how do we ever get out of it? How with all the protests, etc., and that calling for people not to go to the army, etc., how are we going to get out of such a thing? And yet this is the story of the great optimism of Parshat Beshallach, that the Jewish people, a Shivcha, can see. We can sometimes go through an historical event and witness in our own eyes a type of revival of the dry bones, and to live mamash in a vital way, and B'ezrat Hashem, that will be continuously in our days. Shabbat shalom lekulam.